This is my life with albinism.
Now, this is my life with albinism.
And this is my life with albinism.
Okay, welcome back to another episode of Life with Albinism podcast. I'm your host, Dale, and I have two wonderful new guests here today. I'm going to let them introduce themselves, so give the people your name, where you're from, and your social medias if you would like to give your social medias.
Okay, I am Sonali Nanavati. I grew up in Michigan in the US and I live in Bangkok, Thailand. And my socials on Facebook, I'm Sonali Fangchusery.
I'm Isabel Barnett. I live in Ohio. I was adopted when I was 3, so I was born in China, but now live in America.
Okay, so I'm going to start with you, right? So you were born in China, and the last time I had an interview with a person who was of Chinese descent who also had albinism, they stated that they were adopted, and their particular story was that once he was born with albinism, he kind of alluded to the fact that in China, albinism is kind of shunned. So he mentioned like his parents just kind of just literally like just threw him away, and then he had to be found by, I guess, what would be the Child Protective Services over there, and then was brought into adoption. Can you speak to that, and is your experience anything like that?
So I'm pretty sure mine was due to the one-child policy because.
Oh wow.
So because I was born in 2004, that's the estimated date. I was found when I was 2 months old. But my mother did leave me like in a bassinet with like blankets and diapers and formula. So.
And left you where?
On a street corner, I'm pretty sure.
Wow.
Some paperwork says differently, but I was left like in a public area.
Wow.
But an officer official, someone picked me up. I was taken to the first hospital of Lyon, and they did examination and they gave me an estimated birth date.
Wow. So, do you hold any kind of resentment towards that? And you already explained that you don't believe it had anything to do with the albinism. It's probably the one-child rule. Do you hold any resentment towards your family for that? And do you have a connection with them now?
No, because there's no information left with the bassinet, so I have no idea who my birth parents are. And I don't really hold resentment for it. I kind of think it's funny right now because, okay, this is gonna sound bad, like 300 million women were killed during that time. But the funny part is, though, sorry, not that, that's not funny, but that now China's facing the issue of that they were having lack of females, and so men aren't able to, find women and get married, and so it's kind of like I don't know what the word is, I can't remember.
So, now, the last thing I want to ask about that, when you were growing up, when you were younger, did you think that your albinism had anything to do with what they did?
My parents leaving?
Yeah, did you think that your albinism was the reason when you were younger?
I would say, I feel like the one-child policy was a majority, but having albinism probably also was like a 75 to 25. Because yes, having someone that is different, obviously, just like the other person said, it is shamed in China.
Okay. And now let's talk about your experience. So you stated that you're of Indian ethnicity, correct?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
and you live in Thailand. So were you born in India?
No, my parents immigrated from India to the US. I was born in the US and then I moved to Thailand when I got married.
Okay, and how old were you then?
When I moved to Thailand,
Yeah.
26.
Okay,
Yeah.
so can you talk to me about what is the experience like living in Thailand with albinism? Is it prominent over there? Do you meet other people with albinism over there? What is that experience for you?
I have not met other people in Thailand who have albinism. I think in a lot of ways it was a way for me at the time to escape my ethnicity because I could mask as people would be like, oh, you're Russian or you're Scandinavian. And instead of recognizing right away that, oh, I'm Indian, which when I lived nearer to my family, it was always, there was a lot of questions about it because
Right.
nobody else in my family has albinism. And so in some ways it was a way for me to escape it. And in Thailand, because there's a lot of a variety of people don't tend to question it. The questions I get are usually not from Thais, they're from foreigners living in Thailand.
Okay.
And I think it was a good way for me to escape my ethnicity until I had kids, and my kids ended up with my ethnic pigmentation. And I was like, oh, now I've got to deal with this.
Right.
Because now
Right.
I've got kids that have Indian skin, hair, and eyes,
Right.
and they're going to be facing the same questions that I faced as a kid, and that just shut me down.
Wow. Okay. And for you, did you ever live a portion of your life in China?
Up until I was 3, so I was in a regular orphanage until I was 2, and then I was sent over to a special needs orphanage, and I was adopted from there.
Okay, and so you lived 90%, 95% of your life in America.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, because now have you been back to visit China since then?
No.
Okay, because what I wanted to ask is, what is the dynamic like living or being in China with albinism? But
Actually, I mean, I can give you some of perspective. I have 2
Okay.
siblings with albinism.
really,
So my brother Ethan, my mother had two biological children. They're both boys, and so when Ethan was born, they found out his albinism, and they came to a NO conference actually, and then they went to the adoption forum, adoption with albinism, and so then they felt led to adopt a child with albinism. So that's how I'm here, and also my sister. She came when she was 16 though, so she did experience, unfortunately, the downside of what China's like, of having some sort of difference, and so she would have to walk to the store every day because she lived with her foster grandma, but people would slap her.
really.
Mm-hmm.
So people were abusive towards her just because she looked different.
And in China, she did not get past 2nd grade.
Wow. Yeah, and that was similar to what the other gentleman that I interviewed from China, he expressed that people were just extraordinarily malicious to him. Like he stated that if he walked into like a store, the store owner could just kick him out for no reason, to say, get out of my store. You know what I mean? Like he had like these absolutely obnoxious scenarios that would happen to him. So it sounds like in China that albinism is just really that that taboo or that shunned. Is it like that in India? I mean, I'm sorry, Thailand. Is it like that in Thailand where you feel maliciously treated out there?
I don't in Thailand. In fact, I made the choice to stay in Thailand. When I was getting divorced, I thought I would come back to the US. And I think Thailand is very different from India, so I can also share about that. But I feel like in Thailand, there's actually a lot of, one, I can mask as a foreigner, and people assume that until, so it doesn't really impact me in that way. And so people just think I'm a foreigner.
Right.
Instead of I'm Indian. And actually, in a lot of ways, and that works to my advantage because people who are Indian are actually viewed more negatively than foreigners. So it's not politically correct, but in some ways, when they don't realize, it works to my advantage. But I actually chose to live there. I was planning to move back to the US, and I was like, how am I going to make this work as a single parent with 3 kids, and I don't drive, and I was going to move back to my hometown where I grew up, and I would have to live walking distance from the school and walking distance from a grocery store. And then I just realized, I was like, wait, I'm much better off staying in Thailand, where I live 5 minutes from the SkyTrain. I live 4 minutes from a major shopping complex with the grocery store inside of it. And I live 5 5 minutes from the park, and where I now like own a car and can hire a driver. I'll never drive that car. I'll own a car and never drive, but I have a driver, so I can take my kids anywhere I need to go to whatever activities, and like the mobility is not an issue. And like taxis are easy to get and not expensive like they are in the US, where it's just very commonplace. So Thailand has been a really good place for me, and I feel like in general people kind of leave you alone, you know, in part because I'm a foreigner. If I were a Thai person with a disability, that's very different. There aren't opportunities for Thais. But being a foreigner, and because of my accent, they think I'm Western. Because I grew up in the US, so they really have no idea. But I think it's actually something I've thought a lot about lately is my experiences with India, because, and my experiences growing up, because I didn't know I had albinism until I was 12. And I'm the only person in my family.
So what did you think up until that point? Was you thought you were just very light-skinned?
It was just my normal. I didn't question it. I didn't question.
Okay.
And I think I was really dissociated from my body, because I found out when a special ed teacher finally decided, I think she was like, okay, I've had enough. And she had me read an article on my CCTV at school, and it was about somebody with albinism, and she's like, have you heard this word? I was like, no. And it was like my whole world just flipped upside down in that moment.
What about your family? Like, you said that there's no one else in your family with albinism.
Yeah.
Right? So I get it that you didn't question it as a kid, but were there not those scenarios where you're looking at the rest of your family like, I don't look like any of you guys?
I didn't look like any of them, and we had all the questions all the time, and people would, and going to India, you know, like being touched or being followed or being stared at were normal, but I just internalized it as stress and tension, and I didn't question it, because in a way, like, I think albinism is viewed negatively, and if something is viewed negatively, then you don't talk about it, you pretend it doesn't exist, so that you can exist. So I experienced that, and then like the day after that teacher told me about albinism, it was like the next day on the playground I heard all the words, albino, whitey, Casper, you know, but I didn't hear it before that period, even though it was happening.
Wow. So that leads me to the last question that I want to ask you both. And we'll start with you. How has, overall, how has living with albinism been for you? How has that journey been, and where are you at with it now? That's what I want to ask you both.
So I live in a suburban area. My house is actually kind of in front of a highway-ish, and so I'm not able to get to places on my own with, you know, any way. I can't. I'm able to do bike driving, which is very happy about, but I'm not completed it just yet, so I still have to rely on family and friends to transfer me areas, so that's very frustrating because I want to be independent, but I can't really do that. But growing up though, I did go to a good school where we were provided things for accommodations, and no one ever treated us really differently. I mean, they saw that we looked differently, but I never felt different from them in any way, and so I'm very thankful for that, of course. And even now, no one treats us differently. I worked at a grocery store for about a year. I mean, everybody just said hello, you know, general things.
And where are you at with your albinism now, you internally?
I'm kind of like in between right now, because definitely living in an area where no one else has it. My brother and sister do have it, but we're not very close, and so I still have the isolation and feeling like, you know, having these things that still facing the issues and feeling like there's no one else to, you know, talk to or relate to with these. So as I've gotten older, it's more of realizing it more, and so it's kind of become frustrating because it does hinder me from some things, but I'm also trying to see that, you know, it's still a good thing because you're still a person, you know. I still can do things like everybody else, it just takes more work. So it's It's like an in-between at the moment.
Okay. And then same question for you. Overall, how has your experience been with albinism, and where are you at with it now internally?
I think that's a really good question. I think for a long time I could acknowledge that I'm legally blind, but not the albinism piece. I think where I am right now is acknowledging that I think I tried to identify more as Caucasian or Western or American than Indian. So it's been identifying more, finding my brownness inside of me, and working on that. And so that's been where I am now. I think I feel good about who I am as a person, and I can talk about having albinism, and I can talk about being legally blind, and I feel really comfortable with the family that I've created with my kids and with my friends and living in Thailand. Where I do not feel comfortable is when I go back into situations with my family of origin. And as I've found me and come to terms with who I am and what my needs are as a person with albinism and a person that is legally blind, it's become harder and harder for me to engage with my family of origin, because those needs are different from what they would anticipate or expect. And so it's created more distance in that space while I've become more clear on who I am.
Okay. Well, I want to take this time to thank you both for doing this podcast. And I know it was so last minute, I kind of just snatched y'all up. But I want to thank y'all for sharing y'all very, very personal stories. And I really appreciate y'all both doing this podcast with me. And another amazing episode of Life with Albinism. Make sure you guys subscribe to the channel, and also go to lifewithalbinism.com to check out all the merch that we have available and all the new episodes that we have coming.